So, Premier Smith, before we get into the news that you've been creating this week, you just came off the First Minister's meeting. What was that like? What was the message from Prime Minister Carney about the meeting in Washington? And did he offer you an olive branch?
Well, I can tell you. That the first ministers increasingly are of the same mind, that we have to clear away the barriers to be able to do investment. Every single premier has a priority project that has been stymied in some way because of onerous federal regulations. And I think that now we're beginning to see how important it is for us to support each other so we can develop our economy, become that economic powerhouse. And I was really pleased with the tone of the meeting today.
Yeah.
Any particular message coming from Prime Minister Carney after the trip to Washington?
Well, I can tell you that he certainly has set a different tone with the premiers. The fact that he's already had several meetings with us, we have an in-person meeting planned. He's made sure to be in touch with us every time he comes back to give us a bit of an up. I have some sympathy for the press conference that played out in public. I have, as you know, met the president, and I too had to spend more time listening than talking. And then when you get a moment to talk, you've got to put your points in, and I think he did. It sounds to me though like the meeting that went behind closed doors was a little bit longer than expected. It went an hour and a half, and it was very cordial. And so I think that the reset is beginning. I mean, all you have to do is look at the video that the White House produced today. And I don't think I've seen that with another world leader that has left the office. So I think that we're well on our way to beginning to repair that relationship. And I think that's positive for the entire country.
Look, I've been upfront on my feelings. I did not vote for the Mark Carney Liberals in this last election. I wrote many columns opposed to their policies, but you have to hope for the benefit of the country. In terms of him coming out of the meeting in Washington, that's one thing, and you hope that is a good thing. But you've made several recent demands. The industry, the oil and gas industry, put out several demands. None of those were really talked about by Prime Minister Carney during the election. Is there any sense that an olive branch will be forthcoming, could be forthcoming? Because, I know some of my colleagues in the Eastern and Central Canadian media want to just tut the idea that Western separatism is something to be mocked or ridiculed. But, I know that it's a reality, and it's disturbing for me. And I know it's disturbing for you. I watched your comments the other day. So, a Prime Minister's job is to ensure national unity. Has he made any comments, any overtures to you that would make you say, you know what, maybe we can find common ground on something that will lower the temperature on this issue?
What I will say is we've had a conversation, and I'm hoping to have many more, where I put those 9 issues on the table and he didn't say no to any of them. Didn't say yes, I'm going to address them all. But the fact that his first reaction was not no says to me that we have some common ground to start on. I've seen Doug Ford very vocally and in public talk about the importance of changing the regulatory process under C-69 so we can get things built. That applies as much to Ring of Fire mining projects as it does to pipelines. I've been grateful to see that level of support from the chair of our Council of the Federation. And so I think he's getting the message from a number of different voices, not just mine, not just the energy industry, but also other premiers, that this is a rare moment where the nation is united. We realize the threat to our sovereignty that comes from the Americans because we haven't worked as well together in the past. And let's seize this moment to actually act like a nation and support each other. I think that is a very strong sense sentiment at the First Minister's table, and I think that he's getting that message from a lot of different viewpoints. So I hope that we're able to address some of the 9 issues that I've raised that are crippling investment and confidence in our province, and then we can bring the temperature down on those who are losing hope that Canada can be fixed.
So now it's time to
Okay,
be
so
quiet.
I appreciate that you raised Ontario Premier Doug Ford
But like
because
you're still allowed to
I
exist.
did see some headlines saying he's chastising you.
Because we're
I
not
was seeing feet from him yesterday when he
when
talked about I want a united Canada, and I thought, you know, and some people walked away from that saying, "Oh, well, he's taking on Alberta Premier Danielle Smith." And I was like, "Well, I'm pretty sure I saw her say she wants a united Canada the other day. You're not going to stop the referendum." And you'd be foolish to try to. That would just embolden those who want to break up the country. But I did not see what Premier Ford said as an attack on you so much as a defense of a united country. Am I wrong in my read of that? Because it sounds like from your comments, you're reading it the same way I am. Because in that same quick scrum that he did with the journalist at Queen's Park, where I stood feet from him, he talked about the importance of pipelines going west, going north, and coming from Alberta to the east.
Doug's a friend, and he and I find a lot of common ground when we're talking about the issues that matter to our respective provinces. And look, it's my job as premier to allow my other premiers to know the pressures that we're seeing in Alberta, just as much as Scott Moe was able to have a similar frank conversation. And we think, I think I'll speak for myself, I think it's my job to do what I can to address the legitimate issues that Albertans have so that they can get confidence again, that we can get a deal that's going to be able to benefit us at the moment.
Would be like you and walk up to like groups of black guys, be like, "Hey, how you doing? What you guys doing?"
Yeah.
And they would be like, "What the fuck?" Like, and they're like, "Yeah, sure, cool, whatever." Like, but that's who he bought his drugs off, apparently.
And then some people wanted to blackmail him, so they took a fucking picture of him and with a small little camera.
They said the media hired them. They said that the media not only hired them, they said they threatened to call the police and have them arrested for drug fucking selling.
Yeah.
Drug selling.
But you know what he got caught for now?
What?
He got caught for fraud because he just to invest into his kid football team at a school. So it was like
Which
taking
literally every politician does.
yeah, but it's taking money and putting it specifically somewhere. It's legal. You have to go to the
Justin
public
Trudeau
channel.
bought tickets to the Taylor Swift concert for
And
his
when?
daughter and all her
The
friends.
$40,000 one. Or something, the $1,400.
Like, you're gonna tell me, and they're like, "Oh, he probably paid out of his own pocket." I'm like, but why would he? Like, isn't his own pocket
Why would he?
also the government's pocket? Like,
No, it was to encourage the little girl and that you got this little bracelet.
even worse.
Like, you're a pedophile.
Yeah, you're a fucking creep. Like,
No, you're a pedophile, sir.
no, I think it was super fucked up when he brought his daughter to the German fucking movie and then his son to the Barbie movie, and he was like, "That's how we do it in our family." It's like, go fuck yourself. What are you doing?
I don't know, maybe I'm doing that.
What? I'm losing it.
A little bit.
Me too. Me too.
I have to go to get a coffee at an Esso.
Was it garbage? I was about to say, was it garbage?
It's fucking garbage.
I don't have any rum, so I don't need it.
Yeah, we're gonna be good coping without using it. There's imaginary rum in it.
I was gonna make myself a tea. Oh, really? What? Want me to make it? Well, have some water. I'll give you a glass of ice water. Right, this is a big new one. Carney spent $33 billion without Parliament authorization. Bank of Canada issues emergency warning: financial stability at risk.
Where's the smoke go? Right here, yeah. Oh, thank you.
Spain just collapsed, and the EU's $1 trillion solution is insane. I don't give a shit. That's interesting.
The bat helped all my body, but where it hurts in my back.
I'll go get your stuff.
Not yet.
Or is it upstairs?
got dry. I don't want to get wet again. Let's wash my hands.
I can put it on you if I use a glove. Yeah? I think I have to clear my cache
Yep.
for what do you call it
Google.
on Opera because
Oh, yeah,
I can't get past the ads anymore. And they're like, your ad blocker's on. I'm like, it's Opera. There is no ad blocker. Like,
Yeah, there is none.
so I have to fucking open Tor, and Tor takes literally for fucking ever.
Good evening, patriots and liberals. This is Spencer with the MCGA channel on YouTube. I, for the last week and change, you may be aware, have been saying that the election in Canada was stolen. There is ample evidence. and
He's the one who
anecdotes
went to a bunch of
showing
different
that there
polling
was domestic
stations
interference,
with like a bunch of
vote
different kinds of
tampering,
IDs
and a
and
whole
was like,
slew
here,
of
is
other
this
awful
okay?
things
And he was
that occurred
fucking
in this election.
amazing at it. Really,
Nonetheless,
I don't even know
I
where
am
he
now
I don't even know what
by
journalist
Eric
this is. I've never seen him
Smirchuk,
before in my life. Never even heard of him.
Liberal MP,
But he
who
went to a
not
bunch of
only
different
is
polling
really bad
stations
at
and he
his
was
job,
talking to them really
but
great, asking like a lot of
personally
really
is a
good
terrible
questions, but not being like too
Nonetheless,
suspicious about it.
Mr.
But he was like, I was
Smirchuk is now
about to
saying
vote.
what
He
I
called
have
the place
been.
after. He was like, I was
There
about
are
to vote. And they're like, are you
irregularities in
admitting
this
you just
election,
committed
and
voter
he
fraud? He's like,
demands a recount.
really not listening to what
Now,
I'm trying to
because
tell you.
Eric
I'm like,
Smirchuk is a Liberal MP, he's been granted his recount, and we're going to dive into that today. But before we do, real briefly, I would just like to let everybody know that I do, in fact, own Mr. Eric Smirchuk's website, irekasmirchuk.ca. Please go check it out. There's nothing to find on it other than just a nice message for the gentleman. Either way,
Good job.
Wir alle haben eine Menge Kleidung.
On
Auf
Tor,
Vinted kannst du deine
Look.
Secondhand-Kleidung in
no,
wenigen
just the
Minuten
Tor browser is always
hochladen.
super
Mach
slow.
No, but it's in fucking German.
Oh yeah, because my thing is always
Either
in
way,
Germany.
let me
Anywhere in
break
the EU,
down
really.
the timeline
I
of
think it's
events.
Switzerland.
But before I do, let me tell you how many other places are close within that same margin and what other places flipped to the Liberals. So there are 8 ridings that were flipped to the Liberals or called for the Liberals within the same margin that Mr. Smirchuk complained about. Now, the difference needed for a judicial recount is 1/1000th. Okay? So for Windsor, where this current fiasco is occurring, there's 70,070 voters.
Yeah, I think it was
Now,
Windsor was one of the places
because
that like
The
before they
initial
even
lead that the
started
Conservatives
counting,
had,
they were like, oh, the
233, has
Liberals
been
won.
dropped down to
And like there was a bunch of
77
people who were
magically
like
by Elections
volunteers
Canada.
counting the votes.
And
The
then you
judge
get
And they were
Canada.
like waiting around,
willingly
sitting,
allowed
waiting for
them
the
to
ballots to
squeeze
come
in,
in. And
albeit
they're like,
not
oh, the Liberals
1/1000th.
won. And they're like, that's,
Exactly.
how's that
But
possible? Like,
77 votes
Yeah.
Windsor
is
is
enough
a
of a margin.
huge
The judge
fucking
has
population.
granted
And they're
them
like,
a
oh, we know
official recount.
from what do you
Nonetheless,
call it?
You may be aware that
Terra
Terra Nova, the peninsula,
chicken dip.
right now is also in mid-recount.
Girlfriend is in
Brampton
Windsor.
Center, Brampton
Oh.
South, Central
They're
Newfoundland,
For all the rich people.
Kitchener-Conestoga, Vancouver
All the rich
Kingsway,
people in town.
Hamilton West, Ancaster,
Oh,
Dundas,
really?
and of course, Windsor-Tecumseh. All of these ridings were close enough or are close enough to have someone make a big deal about it, get a recount to get closer to the 1/1000th, and then perhaps get a judicial review. But of course, this is only going to happen for the Liberals because they're the only ones, one, willing to make us think about it because they actually want power, and as well, the people
Because I can't
who are
get through
judging
the
these things
onions
are,
when they're
of
all the way
course,
down there.
Liberal appointed
And
judges.
I don't have potatoes usually.
The
to throw
timeline
all
of
the-
events that we have found ourselves in,
Is that
let me
true?
explain to you. April 28th, federal election occurs, and then conservative Kathy Borelli initially led Liberal incumbent by 233 votes. On the 29th through the 1st of May, Elections Canada, because there were so many, well, there were so few votes that split the two, and since it was so close, they began to validate their results and recount internally. And that reduced the lead for the Conservatives down from 233 to 77.
Oh, I don't fucking know.
Then, May 2nd, the Windsor Star reported on possible tabulation errors that narrowed that margin down to 77, increasing the likelihood that a recount would be called. On the 5th of May, you'll
Mit Vinted wird die Kleidung, die du nicht mehr brauchst, zu dem Extrageld, das du dir wünschst. Ausmessen und abkassieren mit Vinted.
Tinted.
stop dieting.
seriously stop dieting because you don't need to.
I'm
I
listening.
stopped dieting
Oh,
and
no, 'cause
literally
you're trying
dropped
to
from
sell a
247
different
to
product.
197 in just
Fucking so annoying. Stop using
of
your
May.
diet products. This is
You'll
a new diet
may
product.
be aware that the Kashmirchuk campaign came out and requested formally and said publicly that they will be filing for a judicial recount. The results in the Windsor-Tecumseh Lakeshore were razor
Yeah,
thin. Over
you know,
70,000
don't-
residents cast their vote, with only 77 votes deciding the outcome. That is just 0.1% of the vote. We missed the Elections
Potato
Canada
cancer.
threshold for an automatic
in,
judicial
in
recount by only
Ireland,
7
They had
votes. We are
barns
requesting a
filled with
judicial
fucking
recount because we
potatoes,
owe it
and
to
they were
all
like,
residents,
all these
blah,
the
blah,
guys
blah,
with a
blah, blah.
clipboard and glasses
blah,
and a
blah.
suit. He comes in
I
front
am
of
Rick
us.
Kashmirchuk,
Look,
and
potatoes.
I suck.
Yep,
No,
nope. These
so
potatoes
Rick
are all
Kashmirchuk
contaminated
makes
with a
a big
fucking
deal of it.
cancerous
Frankly,
poison
rightfully
because
so.
of black spots. And
CBC
the guy
on the
standing there
7th
is like,
publishes an explainer
potatoes.
on the judicial
They
review
grow.
process, which is very interesting
Like,
that the CBC is
They have some of
letting
them
all the people
sometimes
know
have things
this
on.
is
Like,
okay.
it's not
Don't worry.
abnormal.
Propaganda
Like,
is
he's
telling
a
you that it's
potato.
okay for the liberals to
Potato
do a
farmer.
recount. This is the Donald
Yeah,
Trump
Yeah, you
stuff.
cut it out.
It's
You
okay,
see something
liberals.
weird on a potato, cut it off.
Uh,
Or take it out of
It's
potato.
fine if I do it,
Fucking
not if you
retarded.
do it.
So
And then
stupid.
we get May 9th, when Ontario Superior Court Justice Ross McFarlane approved the judicial recount after only
Yeah,
1 hour of a
early.
hearing. Okay? A 1 hour hearing. By the way, take into account the 5th
Yeah, I
to the
figured.
9th. Alright. I guess,
Okay,
you know, it's because it's an election, they get a special, quick review
leave
process,
at
but
7:30.
how many countless crimes
Why?
have people committed? How many
Is this
countless
when you wanna
court
start
cases are out
early?
there sitting
Get
and
those
waiting
direct up
because
the
there's
truck
not
and
enough
sell us
justices
Yeah,
to
okay.
see
Get 2
them?
more hours, and you're not
And of
leaving at
course, the
7
liberals
o'clock.
can squeeze in within 5 days.
It gets you
and
the
get
same
themselves
hours, so
in
you guys
front
aren't
of
leaving
a
at 7
judge.
o'clock.
Yeah.
Of course they do. Now that justice's name
It's good.
is Ross McFarlane, who you may
Yeah,
not
I
know,
got a house,
but
I mean-
you will know who appointed him.
I still want to see my
Mr.
kids when I come back.
David Lametti. I'm sure
Yeah, but
everybody
when he gets
remembers
back, they're
David Lametti.
fucking having
He
dinner,
was
go
the
to bed.
Justice
Like,
Minister who
yeah, but you
was
know
the
what?
one
That was my dad
invoked
too.
the Emergencies Act.
I
Okay?
never saw my dad.
The War Measures Act that was invoked
Unfortunately,
to
that is
attack
the
Canadians protesting freely.
outcome of being
Mr.
part of
Lametti was,
the
of course, the gentleman who
productive member of
brought
society
that
and the
up.
middle class.
he is
Like,
the awful person for that
things we
alone.
never see his
As
family.
well, he is responsible for
It
delaying
was even
and
worse because my
simply
dad used to work
having
grave shift,
insufficient
so he
bail
would be
reforms
gone all night,
and giving
and then
lenient
my mom would be
sentencing
alone with us at
as
night,
well.
and then he could
Not
only get
that
back in the
many
morning, and
people
so
hear about it,
people
but
did
he
when we
also
were at
has
school
handled
or if we were at
Indigenous
home.
survival records. And he, as well, is responsible for judicial
sit down
appointment
right here.
delays. And perhaps the worst of all, if not it being the Emergencies Act, is he helped expand MAID. So, one of the men who's responsible for killing 1 in 20 Canadians in a roundabout way is also, of course, responsible for appointing
What? Our house is so
the
nice.
one and
Yeah, I know.
only Ross McFarlane. Now,
Our
we're going to
house
watch
is so nice.
CTV cover this judicial review with an interview with the one and only Arek Kazmierczuk, and then we're going to dive deeper into this chaos occurring in Windsor.
Today, a judge is forcing a third count. Verleih Secondhand-Stückchen ein neues Leben. Mit Vinted. Lade die App herunter.
Starting tomorrow, this simple water hack can change your life. You may not know this, but the biological difference between overweight and lean people is not the number of calories you consume per day. It is the reason some people are skinny from birth and eat whatever they want while you diet and exercise yet struggle to lose a single pound. A July 2024 study from UC Berkeley and Yale University revealed that in every overweight person is a tiny primitive metabolism switch that is dormant in your body right now. This study showed
every
that this
fat
primitive
person,
metabolism
Like,
switch
I thought he was gonna say what the guy says on oh my god, what's that movie? Breakfast Club? And he's like fucking oh Claire, it's a fat girl's name. She's like, oh thank you. He's like, you're welcome. I'm not fat. He goes, yeah, and maybe not right now, but in a couple years. He's like, you know what? There are two kinds of fat people in the world. There are people who were born fat and always will be fat, and there are people who used to be thin, but then at some point they became fat, and you can still kind of see that skinny person inside of the fat person.
What was that movie with Jack Black? He's,
Very specific, yeah.
No, but I'm gonna keep going and just take a breath, you know.
Jack Black.
He sees the chick super thin.
Oh, Shallow Hal.
Huh?
Shallow Hal.
Yeah.
That was a great movie. I liked it. That was a really good movie. He's a super fucking huge douchebag. And he's just like some fucking like slightly chubby chick who's just like, hey, you want to dance? He's like, oh god, no. It's not personal. I just like have standards. Like,
We got a shot.
A lawyer for incumbent MP Eric Kuzmerchik was able to convince a Superior Court judge to recount the Windsor-Tecumseh Lakeshore ballots.
Almost right away on election night, we heard from our amazing volunteers and scrutineers who were inside the polling stations that some of the ballots that were rejected incorrectly, wrongly.
Court learned today, in at least 4 instances, a voter put an X in Kuzmerchik's circle and a check mark at the end of his name. On another, a voter wrote, I vote for Eric on the ballot with a check in the circle. Another wrote out his full name. According to Kuzmerchik's lawyer,
that's what
the
you're supposed
only
to do
reason
for the
to
pre-voting.
reject
You
a
have to write
ballot
down
is if the
your
voter
politician's
intention
name.
isn't clear or if the voter identifies themselves. Justice Ross McFarlane agreed with Kuzmerchik's scrutineers that some ballots may have been wrongly rejected. The judge ordered a recount.
If we're going to do this, now that we're opening the ballot boxes, we got to do it right. We got to have the right resources to be able to do that.
With 3 other recounts now on deck in Canada, the Windsor-Tecumseh Lakeshore recount can't start until Tuesday, May 20th. Lawyers expect it will take 3 days. Kuzmerchik says he'll be there to look at each
When was
ballot.
this? 2 hours
The
ago.
judge will be the final arbiter in terms of which ballots are accepted and rejected.
The winner will be determined officially and finally, likely by the Friday, just 3 days before Parliament resumes.
We absolutely and unequivocally will respect the results of this judicial recount.
Yeah, something that will be hotly watched.
Apparently
across the country,
not.
Because as we were talking about, the Liberals are just 3 seats away from majority territory, and this could nudge them in that
And there
direction.
are
Oh, okay.
Let's go into the connection between the judge.
So the Liberals are saying that there was a miscount in the votes because they don't have enough seats for a majority.
Yeah. They want to be majority.
That's hilarious.
That's fucking scary.
That's so stupid. Wow. You know what? Okay. So when Trudeau became prime minister, he did this thing where they started bringing electronic voting. And everybody who votes, I'm pretty sure, like, I've not met one person who agrees with the electronic voting, because we all know that electronics can be hacked into. And even if they are supposed to be unhackable, there's nothing that is thank you, baby.
You heard it?
Yeah.
I gotta throw it under his face.
So Trudeau did this thing where he implemented the electronic voting system, whatever, but he said it's not going to count towards the vote. We're just using it as like a practice test, so that if we can incorporate it, we'll know like problems that come up before we actually implement it into actual voting. But we're just doing this as a test for like funsies, basically.
It's kind of half stupid and half smart.
No, it's really, really stupid. Like, everybody knows all. Nope.
It's straight up talk was good, but the idea is completely shit.
I don't want someone who sits at home on their ass on the computer to be able to vote from their computer. I want you to know what they're. Yeah, but like I would rather not, because you know what? I don't want to vote for Poilievre anyway. Like. Like, and I don't. That's why I didn't end up voting. 1, because I know the elections are rigged, and 2, because I don't feel like I would want to vote conservative. I don't agree with basically all of their views.
Yeah.
They're super religious. They're against abortion. Like,
The last one was the warm-up there.
yeah, no, they're super into their oil and shit. And I think, yeah, the Liberals kind of ruined the people giving a shit about
the environment with their fucking crazy fucking global warming shit, but
Oh. No.
The person who appointed him, the person complaining, and the Liberal Party of Canada. The judge, of course, McFarlane, was appointed by none other than Lametti. Lametti, again, being a awful MP and even worse person. Nonetheless, Lametti, how is he connected to Kazmierczuk? Well, of course, they served under Justin Trudeau during the same time. What's very interesting to note is that in 2020, in November, with single sports betting being a hot topic,
Oh
and of
yeah.
course Windsor being the hub of gambling, Iraq and Lametti worked together on getting the legislation passed. They got royal assent for the allowance of single sport betting. They also had a very charming press conference celebrating their win together on the 26th of November, 2020. In 2021, there was close ties, publicly and privately, between Lametti and Kazmierczuk for their support for Bill C-218. They, with a private members bill, again, legalized single event sports betting, which, of course, shows ongoing collaboration between the two. In August 2021, Kazmierczuk announced sports betting developments with Labor Minister Tassi, coordinated through Lametti's Justice Department. And then, of course, we have Lametti appointing Ross McFarlane in 2023, who is now ruling on Kazmierczuk's recount. So, Lametti worked closely and has had a close public relationship with Kazmierczuk, and also appointed, of course, the judge who is now ruling over his recount. It is quite the coincidence that that is the judge who is ruling on this. But of course, it's not a coincidence. We're going to run through the timeline as seen in newspaper articles published April 29th.
Europas größtes Finanzevent für Frauen. Nicht für Hedgefondsmanager, nicht für Investmentbanker, sondern für dich und jede, die wirklich wissen will, wie Geld funktioniert. Auch in 2025 stehen viele Frauen finanziell schlechter da als Männer. Weniger Gehalt, weniger Rente, weniger Vermögen. Woran liegt das? Frauen investieren seltener und trauen sich beim Thema Finanzen häufig nicht so viel zu wie Männer. Das können wir nicht länger akzeptieren. Deswegen haben wir, Europas größte Investmentakademie, ein kostenfreies Online-Seminar für dich erstellt. Dort erhältst du das Wissen von über 20.000 Mitgliedern und das nötige Selbstvertrauen, um deine Finanzen endlich selbst in die Hand zu nehmen. In nur 2 Stunden erfährst du erstens alles, was du über Geld wissen musst, kompakt, unterhaltsam und interaktiv.
So weird when they have like this random English words that could be
April
translated.
29th, 2025. Kathy Burley flips Windsor to come see Lakeshore for conservatives. And then we have May 2nd.
Natives are like
Elections
that though.
Canada
There's like a
confirms
bunch of
Conservative
native
Kathy
words that
Burley's
they
win in
like.
Windsor to
There's
come see
no
Lakeshore.
native word for it, so they
Showing
just say it in
a
English.
233 originally reported lead
Like what?
and dropped down just to 77
Yeah.
votes. A very convenient number.
Yeah.
Then, again, we go to the 5th of May, where Mr. Kazmierczuk pushes for a recount because of a razor-thin loss to conservatives, reported by none other than the CBC. CBC puts out its fun little video that they spent tax dollars on to explain to you about judicial recounts so that you could stomach Mr. Kazmierczuk winning again. Funny enough, posted 2 days later. And then, of course, the final nail in the coffin, the judge approves this recount because of a 77 vote separation. Very interesting. What else is interesting to note is the preceding timeline of events that we are to expect. Again, the 9th is when the Liberal appointed justice approves, through again a 1-hour hearing, this judicial recount. We are now to expect in 3 days via a Zoom call, a follow-up meeting with regard to the recount. And then, of course, just in time for the 26th return to Parliament, just trying to squeeze Mr. Kazmierczuk in there, which you have to do in general, squeeze him through doors, etc. Nonetheless, Mr.
You just
Kazmierczuk,
called him fat.
again, on the 20th, 6 days before Parliament returns, we'll find out whether or not he has won. So, guess What is also interesting is the gentleman who presided over the approval, okay? The gentleman who approved Mr. Kazmierczuk's recount is going to, of course, be the justice who finalizes it. So, a liberal appointed justice gives the nod to Kazmierczuk and his legal team after 1 hour to go through a recount. And then, after they do their recount, it will be the same man who approves the final recount.
Okay.
A blatant display of liberal cronyism. Ira Kazmierczuk's cozy
Stop
relationship
eating
with
stuff.
former Justice Minister David Lametti forged through their joint scheming on single event sports betting and liberal backroom deals likely greased the wheels
But
for
I
Ontario's
like
Superior Court
David
Justice Ross
Lametti
McFarlane's
so
appointment
much.
by Lametti in 2023, setting the
Or no, maybe
stage,
it's
of
James
course, for a
Lametti.
biased recount ruling in Kazmierczuk's favor now in 2025. The chumming
The
press
guy that I
conferences
listen
and
to on the
initial
radio
backslapping over
sometimes,
casino
that
profits
he's
revealed
on
a
the-
tight-knit network of liberal insiders.
He's on for
making it
like
no surprise
just
that
one
McFarlane,
segment.
handpicked by Lametti, could be swayed to tilt the judicial scales
What?
toward Kazmierczuk's favor. He is desperately
No,
trying to
no,
climb
no,
up
not
power,
that guy. That's
and if he wins, this will undermine
Oh
Windsor
my God, what's
Tecumseh
his
Lake's
name?
democratic will, of course, through a rigged recount process. Now, being the person who has been calling for a recount, you might seem
Oh, I can't
to
think of
say
it.
that is a bit ironic for me to call this one rigged, but if the justice ruling over it was appointed by your colleague who you are close with, perhaps you should get a new justice. Now, with that being said, good night, patriots and liberals.
Mein Kind wird niemals Schmerzmittel nehmen müssen. Und wenn du Folgendes verstehst, dann müsstest du das auch nicht mehr. Warum? Ich mache mich einfach dick.
What the fuck?
Direkt nackt für dich. Ich hatte selber über 10 Jahre lang Schmerzen. Und ich habe alles versucht. Ohne Erfolg. Und das, obwohl ich eigentlich sportlich war. Obwohl ich fit wie ein Turnschuh war und obwohl ich kilometerweit laufen konnte. Aber hier ist die Wahrheit. Schmerzen kennen kein Alter. Hi, mein Name ist Justus Hirt und glaub mir, Schmerzen erwischen jeden. Jeden, der eine Sache noch nicht verstanden hat. Wenn du Schmerzen hast, dann benutzt du deinen Körper falsch. Und keine Sorge, das ist nicht deine Schuld. Dir wurde nie beigebracht, wie dein Körper eigentlich funktioniert.
My brain is still trying to understand what he's saying.
Ah! Okay, no, it's not the same guy.
It's not happening.
Okay, different guy. I have no idea who that is. Ha! I know that's wrong. Oh. Oh. Oh yeah. Ooh. Okay. Oh. What you looking at? Oh. Okay. Son of a bitch.
On this platform, all of us are pro-Trump to an extent. We like a lot of the things that he pushes, especially when they align with our conservative values. I'm going to go hard on him for this one. He absolutely caused the liberals to win. It speaks for itself. The progressive candidate, he didn't run against the conservative candidate. He ran against Trump. I think Trump did it on purpose. I am just empathetic towards the suffering of the middle who, instead of getting serious change, they got a lot of the same. This week, Mark Carney was elected as Canada's new prime minister, and he largely ran on an anti-Trump platform. So here's some of the things that he stated recently. He's publicly stated Trump is trying to break us as Canadians. So obviously, I'm not Canadian. We all are United States citizens. So we're looking from the outside, right? But then he's also stated Canada will never yield to Trump's threats. He also said Canada's old relationship with the U.S. is over. One of the things we saw, the main conservative opponent, not only did he lose, by a small majority, but he also lost his seat in Parliament that he had held for 20 years prior to this. Now, the Liberal Party almost took over the Parliament, so they almost got the majority seats, but they barely missed out on that. So that's kind of a win for conservatives a little bit, but sort of a silver lining, you could say. But here's the question. Could all of this, and this is what people are talking about right now, could all this be the result of Trump's loose talk when it comes to other nations like Canada? So on this platform, all of us are pro-Trump to an extent. We like a lot of the things that he pushes, especially when they align with our conservative values. I don't personally like everything that Trump has done or said, and I don't agree with everything that he supports, but I do support him in a lot of ways. We made a film about Donald Trump called The Outlier, about his 2016 campaign, and it even applies to this last run. So that's on this channel if y'all want to go watch that. So you can see that we're very pro-Trump in some ways, but the question today is, did Trump's mouth get him in trouble in this case? So are we seeing a negative impact? One of the things he said recently was Canada should become part of the U.S. Even on the day of the election, he stated publicly, I believe it was either on Truth Social or on X,
candidates, come on, you know who you want to be in charge of you? Me, essentially, is what he's saying.
Trolling.
You know, there's this idea of
See, you guys
all
are
of
laughing.
this,
He's
you know,
trolling.
has
It's funny.
created fuel for
The
the
more
party
they get like
that
about it, the
won.
funnier it is.
You know, very anti-Trump, even in his acceptance speech and all that kind of sort of victory speech. All of that is still was very anti-Trump, and we're gonna hold the line against all the things that Trump wants to do. And a Monday night headline from the Daily Beast kind of paints the picture very clearly. The headline was Trump's big mouth propels Canadian liberals to victory. So what do y'all think about this? And then I'm going to give you Trump's response.
So yeah, I appreciate that Trump disclaimer at the beginning because I'm going to be a little hard on him for this one. He absolutely caused the Liberals to win in Canada. I've been following Canadian political YouTube channels for a while, and the prediction was that the Conservatives were going to come back and win and take over Canada again because Trudeau has been running his country into the ground for years. And we could talk about the COVID policy, we could talk about freezing people's bank accounts for protesting and
Ruining fucking
many
marijuana.
other things. The economy has been horrible in Canada, much worse than here in the United States.
Yep.
And
And
they
it's
have been
insane.
suffering from
They're
all
like,
these issues
oh,
and
the
have
United
the same
States is
people
going
in
to
power for
suffer.
a long time.
Obviously, they're
And
not.
There
They
was
do not care.
definitely a very an outcry and definitely a sense of the polls moving and everything moving to where, okay, the Conservatives have a really good chance, mainly just because the Liberals have been running the country so poorly.
Yeah.
All of that changed and switched directions as soon as Trump began talking about making Canada the 51st state.
I'm going to break in for a second and say, if you're enjoying this episode, stick around. And at the end, I'm going to show you how you can get content that's only found on locals.com.
And we could talk about different reasons why Trump has put tariffs on Canada. Some reasons I think are actually good, like he wants Canada to get their act together and stop allowing Chinese triad gangs to operate in the country and export fentanyl into the United States and all over the world.
But
So I
the
think
sad truth
there's
is
been some
Canada
needed
is
pushback
made up
against
off
Canada
of
to say,
gangs.
hey, Canada, get your
So-
stuff together. Stop allowing these drugs to come across your border into
That'll
the
never
United
happen.
States. And so all that's great. We can talk about that. But his language has been extreme enough that the Liberals jumped all over it. And essentially, I saw online, it was entirely this idea they were able to garner enough hatred for the United States more than they love their own country. That's the idea.
That's it. That's
Because
very
the
accurate.
politicians have been running their country into the ground. But because of the amount of hatred they were able to rile up against Trump and his language, essentially was like, okay, we're doing.
Yeah.
I mean, it speaks for itself. The progressive candidate, he didn't run against the conservative candidate. He ran against Trump. And none of his advertisements is he talking about the conservative guy.
Yeah.
He's talking about Trump.
Yeah.
He ran against Trump, which is crazy because
It is.
he's not in America, but he literally ran against Trump.
Yeah, but
And
he's
won.
also not Canadian.
And so, yeah,
So-
if Trump was not using that language, most likely I think the conservatives would have a way better chance.
I think Trump did it on purpose.
Yeah, because he doesn't want to deal with
Why
politics.
would he do that? Why did he want the liberals in charge?
Yeah, I think that Trump had a twofold strategy going on here. Number one, Trump
Not
has
with
always
you.
talk about the
Like,
idea
quick.
of
You're
all
walking
press
around
is
in
good
circles.
press. So Trump's name is in
Mhm.
the news again, always. Canada they've got Trump on their lips.
I know.
Which, why would they do that? That doesn't
Well, yeah.
make sense. But number two, I think Canada wasn't ready for a conservative leader. And I
What?
think that they
Not like we've never had
actually
one.
needed to experience a little bit worse before they were willing to come to the conservative table.
No,
Well,
I think
okay,
they wanted
guess
everything to get
actually
better
now
right
we
away,
can
and that's what
switch
Carney
to victory.
kind
And I
of
think that Trump knew
insinuated that he would
and he
do.
was just
Kind of
pushing
like
them
Trump
to
did.
that brink, and he intentionally caused them to want a liberal.
And he told the middle class, just wait a little longer. Don't worry, I promise you, they get rich.
Worse for the country than the previous
Fucking
one did,
typical
and I
fucking
think it's exactly
narcissist
what he did
gaslighting.
with Joe Biden. And there's something's going to come back around after this cycle, and Canada's going to be more ready and willing to do something on the conservative side of things once they have experienced the full weight of their decision.
I might fall somewhere in the middle.
Just finding
I
his
think
voice.
that I haven't studied Canadian politics here for this recent election, but I would think that it's kind of this principle of, if you provoke something, people can get overconfident and they can overplay their hand. And so they get out over their skis, and then it can expose more of what they're doing. And,
Yeah, that's why he
it can
doesn't
actually make them more vulnerable.
And now all of a sudden he
I
has a
think
whole lot
that,
to say.
whether he intentionally got this liberal elected or not, either way, what it did was it allowed them to speak up more harshly and more clearly about their true intentions and what they're doing. And I think it can expose things and maybe even accelerate some of what you're talking about, Doug. And so, like I said, I'm not sure he's got this master plan of trying to get that guy elected and he understands all that, but I do think there is a plan of he's going to punch and we'll see what comes out of it because he's going to provoke something and then they're going to only play their hand.
Yeah,
and
that's it. And it's working. It's fucking working.
A part of this as well. And I think that I don't think he just is way off on his instincts. Like I think his instincts as a businessman, he knows negotiation, he knows where it's at, and he knows where it needs to go, and he knows how to do something today that's going to benefit in a year from now. And so for me, that's more of where my head goes. It's just kind of like a negotiation, and he knows how to use the public facing that.
You're so Jewish.
He probably has something else in mind.
Well, I'm sure that
you-
you probably had a response for either scenario, like, okay, good, we'll do the conservative ones, good, we'll do the liberal ones, and okay, both are good options.
I'm confident that with Trump at the helm, the U.S. is going to end up in a good state overall and be able to have good negotiations with China, especially pressure them on the drug stuff or whatever. I am just empathetic towards the suffering of the middle Canada
middle class,
and the conservatives
I
in
know.
Canada,
Everyone only gives a
who
shit about the fucking
themselves
middle
are
class.
like, we need serious change here.
Yeah, the middle class is
And
the
instead
reason
of getting
why this guy
serious
got
change,
elected.
They got a lot of the same.
Guy's
And unfortunately,
fucking doomed us all.
whether you think that was intentional or not, a lot of that really is blamed because they were able to.
Because the middle
garner
class
up
is scared
that
they're not
level
going to be in the
of
middle
support,
class
just
anymore.
based
And
off
they're
the
right to
fact
be
that
scared.
Trump
Well, and that's
Agreed.
guy is
Anybody
not gonna
that's
fix it.
conservative in Canada, if it gets too bad, you can always move down to the United States. Trump keeps talking about
No, I
making them
can't.
the 51st state. I don't want Canada to be the 51st state. You know why? Canada's full of progressives. Awful for our elections, our voting. Instead, all the conservatives in Canada should either move to the United States or move to one province, and we should annex that one province.
Okay, so like
the first state. Leave the rest of the progressives into the ground if they want to, but I don't want them coming into our politics.
So I think we need to kind of understand a little bit about elected politics. So like, when I ran for office in 2020, they said, don't bother campaigning to people under 35. Like they're not going to go vote, and they're not going to I'm just like that
They
doesn't make
want
any sense.
16-year-olds
Like,
to
that's
vote.
crazy. I'm
You
like, yeah, but
don't
they
even
don't
know
vote.
history yet.
And so I didn't follow that advice. But
I'm gonna give it your
now we saw the huge
16-year-old
voting bloc,
opinion
young
in.
voting bloc came out, and I was kind of a little bit involved with the Iowa caucus for the Trump election, and you saw a huge push for a very boots on the ground, very different approach, very detailed approach, and that is what got people out to vote. And so that is on the parties, that is on the candidates, that is on the campaigns, that is on the people in politics. And so you can overcome the media stuff by going and knocking on someone's door and actually
Yeah,
getting
but they
them to
don't do
commit
that
to come and
anymore.
vote. So I'm still going to place this at the feet
Goes door
of
to
the
door.
conservatives who didn't do their job and can't.
They
That's
hire
more
people
around
to go
where I would
door
say.
to door.
And I may put that a little harshly, but you can't sit back in your armchair and hope people are going to come out and vote if your party's not out knocking on doors and actually making contacts and actually doing the work that's needed. And we saw a huge change. I was involved in the Trump campaign in 2016 and in 2020, and I saw a radical shift in both the campaign and the Republican Party. There was big changes on how they handled things, how they had precinct captains, how they had very boots on the ground approach. And so I would push back and say, you know what, Canada conservatives, you got to get your act together and you got to get your boots on the ground and do more of what's going to actually move the needle to get people out to vote.
Maybe, but if we have a progressive president elected,
That's what I think about that.
Then Canada's just going to say the same thing to us. They're going to be ripping you, right? And be like,
It's
how
true.
come you weren't?
And then you
weren't
would be right.
good enough?
And they would be correct. They
Well,
would be correct.
Yeah, I think obviously Mark Carney ran on the right platform, being anti-Trump
Yeah.
to be able to
The
win.
middle class
essentially.
is the
that's what I
majority of what's
mean. You
here.
don't have to
Unlike
have
America,
everybody agree, all the voters agree with you on all
upper
the
class,
issues
which is
anymore. You
what
just have to get
Trump
them all to
catered
agree with
to.
you on the
Trump
issue
catered
that's
to
out
different
front and
demographics.
that's in the news more often than any, and who's in the news more often than Trump. So it's like that
Alright.
idea of everybody agreeing on one single issue. I'm feeling very strongly about it. But I think with what you were saying, Doug, I agree to an extent. I think Trump knew what he was doing, but I think I take a cynic. I don't think he quote unquote did it on purpose. With some sort of long-term goal in mind. I think the result could be the same, either way. I think what you said as a result, the next time around, Canada might be fed up and they might say, hey, okay, enough's enough. We need a conservative leader. And that's what I'm praying for, personally for Canada. But at the same time, based on Trump's response, I think I would more likely put my money on the idea of maybe Trump just has a hard time with self-control and controlling his tongue. It's a biblical concept. James chapter 3 says, "The tongue no man can tame. It's an unruly evil." It's this small little rudder that controls the entire ship, essentially. And I think once you turn in a certain direction in public, being a public figure, it's hard to recant from that. Anyways, here's my opinion. I could be wrong, could be completely wrong about this, but this was his response. And again, I'm going to reiterate, a lot of the things Trump is doing, very supportive of a lot of the things he's doing in the United States, a lot of the conservative values he stood up, things he ran on. So even with that, I think it's okay to criticize leaders that we support when we disagree in small ways and anyway. So Trump's response, he said, quote, after he found out that Mark Carney won, he said, until I came along, remember that the conservative was leading by 25 points.
Yeah.
And then he said, then I was disliked by enough of the Canadians that I've thrown the election into a close call, right? Very weird, but it almost sounds to me like he's bragging, like, look, it was my, popularity. Look how much I've affected. It's like, well, yeah. Trump, come on, man. We wanted a conservative to win. We didn't want, it's like, it almost sounds like he's more interested in being the thing that's swaying the vote than actually swinging the vote in the right direction. So that's where I'm getting that idea from. It could also be a personal vendetta as well. Another reply he had to another news source was, he said about the conservative candidate whose name I can't. He said this candidate is not a MAGA guy, and then he criticized the way that conservative Canadian leader was criticizing him.
Yeah, I gotta say that
I think there's a personal issue that's happening here as well, potentially.
Kind of. I have when I ran for office, when I started getting involved in politics, I had a pastor friend of mine that was really involved in politics, and he said, it doesn't really do any good to have a Republican in office if they vote like a Democrat. And so I agree. He actually said, not that we should be voting for Democrats, but he's saying it's very hard to primary a sitting Republican and win. It's happened, especially if the deep state and the establishment is against that candidate. But it's very hard to do that. It's easier to have someone else elected and then unseat them in the following election. And so that could be that would support both of the points he made and that they made, is that, hey, it's not the right guy. Now, whether that's a personal thing or whether it's just it's not going to do any good to have him in anyway, so who cares? Let it go to the left and let them do more havoc and let it expose more.
But they're trying for a parliament.
I would lean toward that.
Well, and I'd have to disagree with your point a little bit, kind of only partially, on the tongue. So obviously the idea of
disagree away, Doug.
The concept behind that is totally accurate, but I just don't think that's what Trump is doing. I think that it's very intentional. For two examples, one, if you watch how Trump actually publishes his opinions, it's very strategic. This is not just throwing stuff out there to see what happens. He's got an entire team of people who surround him all the time, who are on all the different devices with all the different publishing tools, Truth or X or whatever it is they're on. And he says things and they record it, and then they strategize what the goal is to put out the information that Trump has said. And that's why he's so on the front line with immediately responding to things, because he actually has a team of people who are doing
because one
very,
person
very
cannot be expected to do
detailed
all of
strategy.
these
It's
things
not
by
just
themselves.
random. And then for you, here's a good little homework assignment. If you guys want, I don't mean to be throwing out homework, but go watch what Bill Maher just put out with his visit with Trump, and you'll see, and it's a very fascinating story that he tells. He literally went and visited Trump, and if you take the concept of the story behind Bill Maher's experience and pair it with the strategy, you'll see that there's two different Trumps that we're working with. The strategic Trump who is saying these things on purpose because he is manipulating the outcomes of events, and then there is the actual Trump who he is as a person who isn't really doing that. And
but what I do at work is not who I am at home.
It's a big rabbit hole to go down if you want to go down that way, but it's it's very interesting to watch him do all this. And I agree with you, Ryan, and also your point, Troy, bringing up the follow up on like the conservative party leader wasn't really MAGA. What he means by that is he wasn't conservative enough. We need to either go all the way one way or all the way the other. If we can't do that, if we can just kind of stick in this middle ground, nothing's ever going to happen. I think perhaps what he did is he pushed it one way on purpose because it's going to bounce back.
Well, we might have some more clear conclusions after the next election occurs.
Yeah, we're not going to know for a while. That's the problem. This is all speculation.
Yeah, and we've talked about the conservative backlash around the world on other episodes. So I think this it'd be interesting for our viewers, audience, to go watch one of those and put this in this conversation in the context of that as well, and and see what conclusions you come up with there.
I'm curious to see what the Canadian conservative right is going to do after this, you know, because like you said, if this is going to, in the end, help to make even a greater push so that the next elections cycle around, they're able to actually have a majority and seats and move in the conservative direction to save their country. Because I do mean save their country. I mean, I don't have time to get all into it, but Canada is experiencing some major, major problems. And so it's sad to see them continue to go further down the same route, but hopefully maybe they can turn around the next election.
Time to get on the phone and start knocking on doors.
Yeah.
Get rid of that robo dialer and actually dial the number and go to people's houses.
Well, I'm hoping and praying that the silver lining here is that there's going to be a conservative win next time and that people go full force into it. I watched just part of a video that Charlie Kirk released this week titled The Silver Lining to Canada's Disappointing Election Outcome. And I only watched the first 10 minutes, so he might have made a stronger point than this, but it seems like the silver lining he was talking about was, hey, at least we're not in Canada.
Wow. I was going to say, part of my as you guys talking about Trump, I don't disagree that Trump has like a strategy and he has like especially strategic people helping him with, you know, that all that kind of stuff. I just don't think, this is my personal take, I just don't think he cares about Canada.
No,
I don't think he cares enough about
That's his whole
Canada to make a
spiel,
big
is
deal about
America
Canada. So I
first.
don't think he cares where their elections go, whether they go one way or the other way. I'm feeling for the Canadian people because I've seen a lot of conservative Canada YouTube, and I know kind of the things that they're up against. And so I just don't think that Trump was a friend to them this time around. I personally, again, I like all the things that Trump has been doing, but I have a hard time buying into the idea that he's like, oh no, I'm really gonna help Canada. Like, I just don't think he cares enough about Canada. The fact that the things that he said caused their election to go a certain way.
I think it's got enough shit to do.
Yeah, I'm laughing, Troy, because what you said about Charlie Kirk, it's like, well, at least it happened to us. It reminds me.
Yeah, that's
of
the
this.
silver lining.
I heard this guy was saying, I don't know if somebody spilled something, or they had to deal with this big difficult thing, and this guy comes over, puts his hand on his shoulder, and says, "Look, this could have gone worse. It could have been me that had to deal with this instead of you." So
Yeah, I think either way, Reese, I definitely agree with you. I definitely am feeling for the Canadians right now, especially the conservative Canadians, because they've already had it very hard. And in my mind, I'm like, man, I don't want to watch them go through another, 4 years or longer with another liberal leader. After Trudeau and everything that's gone down there, and it's just it's been insane. So yeah, praying for better times for Canadians.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Thank you for your thoughts and prayers.
We also saw Trump put a 90-day pause on a lot of these tariffs. So technically, we're not even seeing the money roll in from a lot of the things that he's affected.
I don't think the tariffs are a cure-all. Like, let's just slap tariffs on everything and get them so high that way we have to manufacture everything. That is a little bit of an extreme approach.
China, it's very important about status. The President Xi comes out and says he's going to stand up for the U.S. If he doesn't, or if he does anything that even looks like he's not, then he's done.
Well, please. What?
Our next story is about a Montreal man who relaxes by singing along with the radio in his car, but his high notes hit a low note when police officers who handed him a ticket that threatens a heavy fine. Now, TV's Rob Lurie reports this motorist's love of dance music could end up in court.
Taoufik Moala still can't decide whether he should laugh or cry. He finished work early, dropped off his kids, and was heading to the store with his favorite song on the radio.
Isn't it a good song?
Wow, you gotta be kidding.
He was listening to CNC Music Factory's dance anthem, Gonna Make You Sweat. But it wasn't music to the ear for police officers who pulled him over.
What?
And then they asked me if I screamed. I said, no, I was just singing. He said, okay, I need your driving license.
5 minutes later, the officer handed him this $149 ticket for screaming in a public space.
What the fuck?
Were you screaming in your car?
I was singing.
You were singing.
Yeah,
That's what they should have been like.
Everybody
Guard
does.
tasers pointed at me, and they were like, someone
at this point,
reported a
we don't have enough
domestic
information to
disturbance. I'm
comment
like,
on the
what?
case. But he
Hello?
also added officers are generally not in the habit of giving out tickets for nothing.
That is literally for
There
nothing.
have been recent cases in Canada where police have been accused of being overzealous. Last month, an Edmonton area man was given a ticket for driving 1 kilometer over the speed limit. And in January, this Alberta man was given a $465 ticket for driving with a crack in his driver's license.
Everybody dance now.
Moala insists he wasn't being obnoxious and didn't mouth off to police. He
Wow.
was just enjoying the day, and he says
Wow.
everyone at some point sings in their car.
Well,
Even Montreal's
obviously.
mayor, Denis Coderre, admits he does.
Oh, what's wrong?
Fuck you. Oh, look, Denny Coderre is still fat.
champion?
But Moala
Oh, God.
doesn't think it's funny that he may have to pay $150. So he's planning to fight the ticket until he gets a judge who likes dance music. Rob Lurie, CTV News, Montreal.
screaming in a public place in your car. I'm like not in a public place. I'm in the privacy of my car.
Mit Vinted wird die Kleidung, die du nicht mehr brauchst, zu dem Extrageld, das du dir wünschst. Ausmessen und abkassieren mit Vinted.
Poor fucking guy. I hate when that happens with the cops. You think it's gonna be like, isn't this a funny stop? Have a nice day. And then it turns into a fucking hour-long interrogation, and you're like, I don't even know what's happening anymore. Ah!
Verleih Secondhand-Stückchen ein neues Leben. Mit Vinted. Lade die App herunter.
At the Montreal Airport Authority's annual public meeting, tensions were high. Citizens say planes are constantly flying over their homes.
Yeah.
The sound wakes them up from their sleep. Mothers out front attended the meeting. They want the airport to enforce a curfew between 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. Instead, the airport is proposing to implement a sound management system.
Oh my God.
Curfew between 1 a.m. to 6 a.m. That will have to be approved by Transport Canada first.
What the question to us, it's not the reality of the people who live close to the airport.
There's another issue as well. The airport will build a decarbonization center, which will remove some of the wetlands in the area. The mothers say this will harm biodiversity in the area.
What we fight for is to protect the nature that is already there.
Environmental advocate Catherine Holden is just as concerned.
Monitoring proposed would essentially have irreversible damage to biodiversity, including threatened and now endangered species that are currently on site.
The airport says it will preserve around 25 hectares of land for wildlife. Anything more, they say, can increase the presence of birds, causing more bird strikes.
The main responsibility of the airport is the security and the safety of the passengers, and this is something that is not negotiable.
But advocates say there are solutions.
Many airports are doing really innovative, wonderful work around conservation. Notably, in Vancouver, where we have Transport Canada and Environment Canada.
Are you like part of Krista Freeland's family? Like you guys talk exactly the same.
We are worried about what is coming for our children and for anyone else.
The airport says its plans are crucial to becoming more environmentally friendly.
Whatever.
Others say they're not giving up the fight. Peter Rassi, CTV News.
Jeder Steinzeitmensch war schneller als Usain Bolt, war stärker als Arnold Schwarzenegger und hätte fast jeden Olympiasieger in die Ecke geknallt. Und vor allem legt er ein Leben.
No. So close. Come on.
Andimetro.
I'm gonna fucking kill you. The unemployment rate just spiked, but it would have been way worse if it wasn't for the government jobs that were added into this report. Yes, this report was highly manipulated, guys, and you'll have to forgive me for the different audio quality. I'm traveling right now, and this report, I just had to cover it because I saw it and my buddy sent it me, and thank you for that. And I was like, holy, you know what I'm going to say there. Fill in the blank. So employment was little changed in April, so it sounds like it's fairly okay, not a bad. But then when you get into what happened to Ontario, it was just a complete disaster. Ontario got absolutely wrecked. And we talked about this for months. For months, I've said that the tariffs and what's going on there is going to cause massive layoffs to happen. And that's exactly what is starting to happen here. So let's get into it. So in April, employment fell in manufacturing, 31,000. So 31,000 people laid off in manufacturing, and employment increased in public administration, 37,000 plus 3%. So that's government jobs. And it does say here that this coincided with the hiring of temporary workers for activities related to the recent federal election. So just imagine how bad this report would have been, how bad the unemployment rate. I mean, the unemployment rate is at the highest level now since 2021. I mean, if you get out of this spike here, it's at the highest level since then. And it's just been grinding higher and higher and higher here. And it's just my base case that it's just going to get higher because things are not looking up. They're not looking up. They're looking a lot worse, especially with this report. So basically, another thing that you have to note here is finance, insurance, and real estate was a gainer here in this report. And again, a lot of these jobs wiped out when you really think about what's going on here. This report was massively doctored, and it will be very interesting to see what happens next month with that employment report, because is that going to be factual, or are all these people just going to be rolled into government jobs? Is the government now going to be like, holy shit, we got to go on a big hiring spree right now? Maybe. So anyway, employment declined in Ontario, Nova Scotia, while it rose in Quebec, Alberta, and Manitoba. So it's very interesting. And then if we go down here, you can see this as well. The number of unemployed people, those looking for work or on a temporary layoff, increased 30,000 plus 2.6%. But get this, guys. This is just unbelievable when I read this. It was up by 189,000, nearly 14% year-over-year basis. So if anybody is out there and they're saying, oh, there's no layoffs going on, people aren't losing their jobs, what are you talking about, employees? Just take a look at the data here. It can be ignored. The Canadian economy is collapsing. It's collapsed, essentially. And it's just getting worse and worse and worse. And with this new government, we know it's not going to go in the right direction. just going to increase the government size. Productivity is going to continue to tank. Inflation will, stagflation will just continue like it has for the past decade.
Skip the
So
recession,
employment fell in manufacturing 31,000. We already covered that, up 37,000 in public administration. But it was really the manufacturing decline here in Ontario that was just like, what the fuck happened? Because Ontario lost 3.9% of all manufacturing jobs. So that is a huge, huge loss of the workforce. So 3.9% in 1 month got laid off. I mean, that is really, really bad. Really, really bad. And it cannot be ignored. So if you look at what happened across the provinces here, you can see many provinces pretty much unchanged. The only most notable, Saskatchewan, continues to defy every other province pretty much, with an unemployment rate now of 4.3%, whereas Ontario is up to 7.8% now. It's heading towards 8% in Ontario. So the Ontario housing market, what does this mean? We discuss all these losses and all these people who overinvested in areas like Windsor, for example. John Flynn was talking about that when I was talking to him, that people pounced on an opportunity to speculate in Windsor, and that's because the battery plant, Northvolt, has gone bankrupt. All that government money that was put into it, 15 billion of governments around the world pension funds, just essentially wiped out as well. So just an absolute, and then if you want to see it on a chart of what happened, nothing illustrates it more than that. So on the downside for jobs, you had manufacturing, wholesale and retail trades, business, building and other support services, food services, and then the rest was pretty much flat. But then look, real estate and the public sector lead the charge. In fact, the amount of jobs gained in the public sector because of the election was more to offset that decline from manufacturing. 37,100 jobs versus 30,600 jobs. So it just goes to show what's going on. And then the youth unemployment rate shot up again. So now it's at 13.7%. So the youth unemployment rate before this, was around 10, 11%, and now it's at 13.7%. And you can see how it's been trending up here. So for young people in the country, it is a total disaster because they are looking at their life and thinking, I'm never going to be able to afford a house.
I'll never get my fucking license
job.
back.
You only have to go and search on TikTok, and you'll just find all the people who have been searching for jobs for months and months, predominantly in Ontario and BC, and they just can't find a job. And if they can land a job, it's some sort of DEI hire at the government, because that's the reality of what the government does.
Fucking
So
Starbucks
it's just
asking me what my fucking sexual
and if you want to break
orientation
it
is
down, how
and what my
different
pronouns
demographics
are.
voted as well,
Like, what's that to
people
do with my
in
fucking
youth, 18
job
to 34 years old, they
pretty
still
sure it's
voted
illegal to ask
a big majority Liberal and also NDP. So it's like there's just no education. It's like people just don't know what they're doing. And, you just cannot ignore this. And if you look at the city breakdown for the unemployment rate, and I put all the sources in the description of the video, by the way, so if you want to check this out for your own city, you can do that. But a lot of these cities went up. So Kingston, Ontario was up 1%. A lot of these cities where everybody rushed to during the pandemic to buy real estate, these areas that have already took significant losses continue to go up. John Flynn's neck of the woods up to 6.8%. Kitchener-Waterloo down slightly. Brantford up. So you've got different places, London up. Look at Windsor, 10.7%. And you guys who followed the channel for a long time will remember that many years ago, back in 2021, when I started the channel,
Oh, really?
I was seeing how all the places where the unemployment had rose during 2021 we would revisit the same thing again. So places like Calgary, Toronto, Windsor, and it's the exact
Never
same
mentioned
thing.
Montreal,
We're
because no
seeing
one
the
could get
exact
numbers
same
from
places
Montreal
that
or
continue
Quebec.
to rise. Calgary unemployment rate went up, even though Alberta
Calgary.
went down as a whole.
Meine Terrasse braucht ein Makeover. Wie geht das?
Hagebau, zusammen geht das.
Today I want to try something a little bit different because I know I make longer videos, usually around 20 minutes long. Sometimes they're a little bit longer. And I want to make sure that people get all I'm trying to put out there. And one of the common things I see is that the video is too long, or they say, hey, why don't you talk about this, or why don't you talk about that? And in reality, I did already talk about it, but people might not have saw it or noticed it because they didn't see the whole video and they kind of just stopped watching it. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to put timestamps down below of the different topics that I'm.
I despise you. Okay. Ow. Toxic.
We have some breaking news on the election front. CTV News has confirmed with multiple sources that the Quebec riding of Terrebonne has flipped to the Liberals.
What?
A judicial recount shows the Liberals have won the riding by just one single vote over the Bloc Québécois. That brings the Liberal seat count in the Parliament to 170. And take a look at this, just 2 seats shy, less than what is needed for a majority. Recounts are underway in 3 other ridings at the moment. Let's not bring in Scott Reed, CTV News political commentator. Scott, good evening. Great to have you on the show. Almost 2 weeks out, election results continue to flip. It's remarkable what we're seeing with this election.
Oh, remarkable. I don't think it's the word. I think fucking terrifying.
Can you imagine losing a riding by just one vote? When you think of every family member who maybe got too busy picking up the kids and forgot it was just on, you let it go. But, what's the big takeaway here? We've got 3 other judicial recounts. Some could flip conservative to liberals, some could flip a little bit conservative. At the end of the day, the liberals are not going to end up with an actual technical majority, but it just reinforces fundamentally that they have a working majority in the House of Commons. They're a whisker away from having a majority. And of course, we have to remember that they have to take a speaker, and that takes one other member of Parliament off. I would think the Liberals will almost certainly allow an opposition member to take that role.
I also want to talk to you about, we know that the ridings are going to be going recounts later this week, but the fact that there is another representation that's coming for the Liberals from Quebec,
Do you think some of that will now have to be reconsidered for the Prime Minister as he's shaping his cabinet? We're expecting an announcement on Tuesday. Could we see some changes?
I don't
Why are
know that we'll
you
see change.
laughing?
I don't know that this result flips the script in terms of what they were going to do. I think we're going to see pretty strong representation of the province of Quebec in the cabinet. And that'll be something we're going to watch for. Regional balance is always a big factor when putting up cabinet together. But you just think about some of the big names. You know, we've got some new recruits like former Quebec Finance Minister Carlos Leito coming in Quebec City. You've got people like François Champagne, you've got Maggie Jolie, Stephen Gabot, who's running the, who's technically the Quebec lieutenant right now from our country. So there are a lot of big names, a lot of big positions. Not everyone
Fuck fucking Stephen Guilbeault. God, that guy's such a fucking piece of shit.
There'll be a lot of Quebecers there, no question.
So there is, of course,
Fucking
an
criminal
opportunity
fucking.
in land with the recount is concerned. I think two of those other ridings are in Ontario. It's not for viewers to understand better. Is the judicial recount, is the law, like, is the finality of what's going to happen with the counting process, or is there any other?
No, of course not.
That's pretty much it. Occasionally you'll see that, candidates might go to the courts and contest
Really?
an outcome, say that they
Really? You go to court for the outcome of the election?
They would have been successful in that effort. One of these ridings is actually a consequence of the failed Liberal candidate, former member of Parliament, petitioning and seeking a judicial recount and bringing it forward after they saying got a judicial recount on that basis. It's also triggered automatically if it's less than 0.1% of the vote overall in the riding. But it's pretty much the end of the line. These judicial recounts will finally settle the election, and they will give us the shape of the House of Commons once and for all.
And just looking back a little bit in history, we are right now 2 seats shy of a majority. When was the last time, looking at the vote shares we discussed so often, Scott, the election results were so very fascinating and so close?
Well, you go back to the 1970s, it was a one seat difference between Robert Stanfield's Tories and the
Tories.
government of Pierre Trudeau.
Oh, really? The Tories were against Trudeau? What?
We had a vote in the House of Commons, a confidence vote.
Oh, right. Tories conservative. Okay, yeah.
Include a couple of conservative votes to our side. That vote.
No, the Tories. This is just what fucking what's his name did. Benjamin Netanyahu did the same thing, where the opposition won, but the guys worked for it. So when the Tories were going against Trudeau Senior, apparently.
That's how close we got shaped that day. So we've seen.
Buddy, I thought they'd be in cahoots.
Okay, we'll leave it at that for tonight. Keeping an eye on the other writings as well. Follow with Scott Reid, City Business Political Commentator. Thank you for your input, Scott.
Thank you. Have a great night.
You too.
Okay, what is this?
Es gibt keine Schmerzen, die man nicht lösen kann. Ich sage es mal.
Are you fucking serious? Oh my god. Copy. Kill somebody. Oh my god. This is so stupid. I'm gonna just fucking stab myself in the fucking face. Oh my god.
Hi, Frank. It's May 5th, 2025, and I feel
with so many people losing track of the script as we await.
Oh, for fuck's sake! Video unavailable. I think YouTube knows I'm copy pasting. What the fuck? Like.
I'm Frank Todd. It's May 5th, 2025, and I feel with so many people losing track of the script as we await May 26th reconvening Parliament. It's a good time to continue a review of Mark Carney's book Values. There's also a lot of Western politicians that seem to be wanting to get ahead of any nascent separatist movement or separatist inclinations. Carl Levesque says Carl Levesque is the leader of the Saskatchewan NDP. Saskatchewan joined Confederation on September 1st, 1905. That was 43,710 days ago. She's a proud Canadian. That's never going to change. And I responded, 43,710 days of struggle against Ottawa. A struggle that goes back long before Saskatchewan joined the Federation. He was Carl loyal to Saskatchewan or Canada, if the latter, and she was in the wrong branch of politics. Provincial leaders, loyalty should be to their province first. Otherwise, get into federal politics. The federal government has been consistent screwing the West of this country since before they were provinces. So it's time we wake up. It's time we allow voices to be heard. And her response to Scott Moe, who hasn't even indicated support for a separatist movement. There's a lot of hysteria that's sweeping the land. He's merely said that people's voices should be heard. Isn't that what we're all about? In a democratic Canada, even though we're a constitutional monarchy, shouldn't voices be heard? And in pursuit of consistency with this objective, we're going to continue listening to Mark Carney's voice. He's our Prime Minister. This is his book. Continuing, this is part 5 of this series, Examining Values. Financial technology to ensure that every financial decision takes climate change into account. So the principal factor in every single purchase you make will be the impact on climate change. What is climate change? CO2. Every time you breathe, you produce it. Remember that. This requires a fundamental reordering of the financial system so that all aspects of finance, investments, loans, derivatives, insurance products, the whole market, systemically take the impact of their actions on the race to net zero. The objective is a financial system in which climate change is as much a determinant of value as creditworthiness, interest rates, or technology, where the impact of an activity on climate change is a new vector, a new determinant of value. Does anybody understand what a fundamental restructuring society Mark Carney represents? An existential threat to the very livelihoods of the people who live in Western Canada, not to mention other places. Because even the mining industry, which is prominent in BC, involves the production of a large amount of CO2. He wants it to be as much a determinant of value as creditworthiness. So your ability to repay a loan that you take will be equal to in determining whether or not you get that loan or whether or not you can make that investment as climate change itself.
What?
And here he says this little quote, and it requires the creation of some new markets. Now, what is he talking about when he says market creation? He's talking about the government stepping in and dictating how you can and can't spend your money.
Yeah.
This should be a clear theme if you've watched the other 4 parts of this series. He believes, but not just the government actually, that central banks themselves can have a central role in the creation and dissolution of markets, determining who the winners and losers are from on high, and telling private money how it can spend itself, how it can invest itself, what it can do and what it can't do. And by the magic, well, you're going to find out about the magic. Another quote: when society places emphasis on solving a problem, the private sector swings into action, coming up with solutions that public authorities could not have imagined and implementing them with a speed and competitive zeal that continually surprises. So remember from the other parts that he declares the market to be behind the evils of the world, not banking, not finance, not anything else, not even human hands. The market itself is the problem. There's not enough rigid control. But here he is saying that politicians, public policy wonks, can dictate the terms of the market, and then the market itself, the private economy, private sector swings into action and miraculously comes up with all the solutions. So the government determines the parameters, and then it's left to the private economy to come up with the solutions. So the government, admittedly, right here, the central banks right here, finance right here, don't have the answers. They're just going to tell you what the answers need to be, and it's up to you to solve for them. It's up to you to find them. It's up for you to fill in the blanks. Continuing in 2015 at COP21 in Paris, following a call from the G20 and the FSB, established the private sector industry-led task force on climate-related financial disclosures under the leadership of Michael Bloomberg, one of those oligarchs we keep talking about that Mark Carney so well represents. Here he is bragging about the coalition of oligarchs. The TCFD recommendations are a solution for the market, by the market, not Main Street, not the market interactions that you and I have, but the market of the ultra-rich, the oligarchical class, which is why I always people call Mark Carney a communist and a socialist, and they call him all these names. He is a technocratic collectivist. To understand oligarchical collectivism, you need to read Orwell. And to understand technocracy, you simply need to read Mark Carney. They are supported by financial institutions controlling balance sheets totaling over $170 trillion with a T, including the world's largest banks, pension funds, asset managers, and insurers. Now, isn't that interesting? That he decides to list banks, pension funds, asset managers, and insurers as the most important innovators. They're not building anything. We're not talking about factories.
The most important person
We're
is
not
yourself.
talking about farmers here.
Who's
We're
that
talking
sound like?
about money pushers, the people that he thinks are completely normal at the top of the pyramid. The disclosure recommendations deliver actionable information that will be useful in decision making by a company's management, its investors, and its creditors. So let's assume you are a company that actually makes things and builds things, or you're a tradesperson that has employees in the same trade, and you're going to the bank for a loan. What Mark is talking about are the people who are going to you can do things, and talking about how they're going to frame the decision as to whether you survive or you don't survive, whether you have access to credit or investors around the net zero concept, around climate change. These are the unofficial governors of your lives, the people who can create money and pick where it gets distributed. Investors need to weigh the options against a range of possible transition paths from catastrophic business as usual to a smooth and timely transition to net zero. This does not present the possibility that CO2 is not the primary pollutant du jour, that there might actually be a degree of alarmism. He accepts the alarmism. He accepts the predetermined nature of the IPCC and other people who push climate alarmism, which is that if there's any science that suggests that CO2 is not the principal driver of climate, it is not allowed to be heard. He is a climate radical, unlike anything Canada has ever seen, because he understands the objectives. He understands climate radicalism and what it can do for the oligarchy, and he isn't stupid. There's a lot of commentators out there who talk about Mark Carney being a clown. This man is not a clown. He's brilliant. He's not like Justin Trudeau. Justin Trudeau
He's a fucking moron.
wasn't really leading. He was a narcissist in a position of power.
Yeah.
And the rules were bent because he had that magical last name.
Yep.
So that he could keep himself there. And there wasn't really a mechanism for the Liberals to remove him, which is why so much pressure was required to get him out of office. He wasn't a genuine leader. He had one could argue, speaking capabilities.
Oh,
He
yeah.
certainly hypnotized the Canadian public,
His whole life. That's what he's
but
been
he
training
outlived his
for.
usefulness. Mark Carney's here to
He's
rule.
a great politician.
Rule directly,
Had me fucking convinced.
not rule on behalf of. Rule directly as a member of the ruling class. Whereas Trudeau is a guest. He was a useful idiot, more than anything. Like a lot of the people in government are useful idiots. Mark Carney's not a useful idiot. He's one of the ringmasters. In a few short years, the TCFD
Yeah,
has
pretty much what
become
you
the
said.
gold standard for climate reporting. Demand for it is enormous, including from every major systemic bank, the world's largest insurers, pension funds, and asset managers, comprising in total over 150 trillion in assets. And once again, you need to understand that in his mind, banks, pension funds, and asset managers are the only people that matter. He does not talk about Main Street. He does not talk about manufacturing. He does not talk about the importance of building things. In his mind, the paper pushers and the money creators are the drivers of the economy. And why would the TCFD become the gold standard? It's because the oligarchical class has applied a lot of pressure on national governments to adopt this farce and to call anything that challenges the farce heresy, to basically render it publicly unacceptable.
Well, just
to
like
challenge the
anything
orthodox.
that's a fucking
So of course,
not
if you're a
pro
financial
Israel,
institution,
it's anti-Semitism.
asset
So
manager,
whatever.
or pension fund, and you're looking at being blacklisted, which is what these organizations do, is they rate you like a social credit score, and you end up on a blacklist where nobody wants to take your money or nobody wants to put money into you. Of course, if there's massive pressure from the apparatus on high, you're going to comply. That's the demand. It's not organic demand. These aren't organic markets. These are creations. They're artificial constructs. And they're enforced by coercion. Now it's time to make TCFD disclosure mandatory. Socialism. Ideas so good, they have to be mandatory. They love that word mandatory. If you've watched
Ideas so good, it has to be mandatory.
That Carney is in favor of massive, overwhelming responses from the top down. Finally, although the time horizons for physical risks are long, addressing major climate risks tomorrow requires actions today. Indeed, actions over the next decade, probably in the next 3 to 5 years, will be critical to determining the size and balance of future risks. So I highlight this part just to say that his time horizon falls within his first term as prime minister. He's not talking about 2050. We're not talking about 2030 anymore. We're talking about the end of industry, the end of oil, the end of gas, and the end of the internal combustion engine with his term. I think that's a vastly unrealistic objective, and he might come out and make public policy statements that deny this. But he wrote this book, and this book is our best asset in terms of understanding what he actually is driving towards. Continuing. Over the next 3 decades, the total required investment in the energy sector alone will be $3.5 trillion per year. That's nearly double Canada's GDP. Another 50 to 135 million per year, quite the imprecise range, will be needed to develop and scale carbon capture and biofuel technology, both things, particularly carbon capture, that should be abandoned. The only reason they exist is to chase this myth that CO2 is invisible gas that comprises a mere fraction of our atmosphere is the great pollutive enemy that we all must unify to fight.
Oh my
It's
God.
not in biofuel technology. And more than 6 billion people, this is in 3 decades, will live in urban areas, and some 400 million homes are expected to be built in the next decade alone, all of which will require green technology and infrastructure to align with a net zero resilient transition. We're not talking about cheap, or if we are talking about cheap with green technology and net zero, we're talking about Hong Kong-style coffin homes, modular homes. You'll be living in sea cans. But this is the real clincher of this piece. 6 billion people will live in urban areas in the next 3 decades. Do you know how many people will live in urban areas today? 4.4 billion.
What?
So he's preaching a religion that requires 1.6 billion
To be
people
basically
to be
homeless.
relocated from the countryside to the cities. We're talking about social engineering unlike anything the world has ever seen before, and Mark Carney is one of its poster boy champions. We are talking about the coerced, aka forced, relocation of 1.6 billion people. Does anybody remember what happened when Stalin tried to move 12 or 13 million Ukrainians? Most of them ended up dead. 1.6 billion is orders of magnitude bigger. And they must, according to Mark Carney, come to reside in urban centers. They must get off the land. And they're going to do this multiple ways. If you're one of those high carbon producing farmers, you got to go.
Wow.
If you're a retiree living in your cottage on the lake, you got to go. You're a threat to the planet. If you're somebody who just enjoys the country life and you want to raise your kids away from the problems that these guys create in cities, you got to go. One of the ways that they might start doing this coercion, they might start softly by taxing your home equity. Do you own your home outright? You're a threat to the planet. You must be taxed until it's unaffordable. And maybe they'll give carbon exemptions to people who produce mass-scale C-can apartment buildings. And you won't have to, the owner of the apartment building won't have to pay. Maybe the state will own it. I mean, he's talking about building 500,000 homes. How's he going to do that? Are we talking about mass-scale state housing? And housing is not really an accurate word because they're probably going to be these little miniature apartments, modular homes. Because you don't need space. You don't need a house larger than what the government is dictating for its climate needs. This is a pretty big deal. 1.6 billion people. That's a lot worldwide. That's a lot. Social engineering on a scale we've never seen. We need, from the book, 50 Shades of Green, referencing 50 Shades of Gray. That's an interesting choice. 50 Shades of Green to catalyze and support all companies towards net zero.
That's so creepy.
And enable us to assess collectively whether we're Paris
Why the
aligned.
fuck would Mark Carney say
Because there is
fucking
no
like
alternative.
50 Shades of Gray, but 50 Shades of Green?
As
That's
with
so
Say
fucking
on
weird.
Pay, where investors get to vote on executive compensation levels, there are growing calls for investors to have a say on transition, a vote on the adequacy of a company's preparedness for the transition to a net zero world. You don't have the alternative to not go along with the net zero transition. You only have a voice and a vote on how you're going towards it,
There's always name.
because they're dictating the rules of the game. And your only choice is how you play the game, whose rules they dictate. That's one reason for the creation of the Glasgow Financial Alliance for Net Zero. GFANZ includes the world's biggest banks, asset owners, asset managers, and insurers. Again, not Main Street, not producers, not people who make things. This is the real world, Mark Carney. Bringing together over 250 firms responsible for over 80 trillion of assets and anchored in the race to zero. And it is the race to zero, not net zero, the race to zero prosperity, where there's oligarchs that sit above you and they get to taste the fruits of the world, which will never meet your lips. Picture somebody in West Africa who grows cocoa, and they slave and they sweat. Remember from earlier parts where we talked about people will need to reduce their carbon footprints to those of Chad and Niger in order to meet these net zero targets. Picture somebody who slaves every single day to grow and harvest that cocoa, but has never tasted chocolate in their lives and will likely never be able to afford to. That's the future. That's the race to zero. And remember, Mark Carney is the guy who founded GFANZ and proudly proclaims that they represent 80 trillion in money, most of which, as he talks about in his book, earlier in this book, is money that's created from nothing. Central bankers and banks just create money. They loan it to you, and then you have to pay it back with your blood, sweat, and real money. And he's proud of this. This is his record. This is what he puts on his resume. Back to the book. As we have seen, a whole economy transition isn't only about funding deep green activities or blacklisting dark brown ones. That means investors cannot rely on simple green-brown taxonomies. They need 50 shades of green to catalyze and support all companies moving towards net zero. These are all highfalutin ideas, but right here, blacklisting dark brown ones. Very clear that he wants to make it illegal, or if not illegal, certainly penalize anybody that wants to invest in makers versus those who just create money from nothing. Brown companies are anybody that produces energy. Brown companies are anybody that produces resource. You could say that brown companies are the farmers themselves that are a threat to the world. Back in the U.S. Wild West, the outlawed John Dillinger used to say that you rob banks because that's where the money is. To get to net zero, financial institutions need to go where the emissions are and provide the capital to get them on track in the race to net zero. He picks an interesting analogy here about an outlaw John Dillinger comparing the financial institutions to an outlaw who have to target the emission producers.
The Bank of Canada could be going lighter on interest rates. Of Prime Minister Mark Carney, that's according to a new report coming from the Financial Post.
I got nothing.
Yeah, that argument that because the government is about to spend so much money that the Bank of Canada won't have to do the heavy lift to stimulate economic growth is one being backed up by Oxford Economics, which says that the government is about to turn on the taps. And while that is probably true, that the government is about to spend an awful lot of money, as we'll see today, history tells us that that doesn't exactly preclude the Bank of Canada cutting rates and cutting rates substantially. In fact, central bank rate cuts and government deficits almost always work in tandem.
I'll try to help you. All right. I appreciate it. God bless you.
So what I want to do today is go over the argument saying the Bank of Canada will be able to cut because of the election of Mark Carney, take a look at the underlying mechanics, as well as the history of rate cuts and deficit spending, and then discuss some implications. As we'll see today, the future isn't quite as simple as current hyperboles pretend, but we will obviously continue to track Canada's economic development on this channel. Make sure you click like and subscribe and get those updates, but for now, let's get into this argument.
Mein Name ist Martin Schmidt und wenn du mehrere tausend Euro hast, die du vermehren willst, dann ist dieses Buch hier genau richtig für dich. Denn damit kannst du aktuell nicht nur ein für alle Mal finanziell durch sein, sondern auch unabhängig vom Chef, dem System und der Gesellschaft werden. Als jemand, der jahrelang Wirtschaftslehrgänge gegeben hat, habe ich es einfach nicht mehr ausgehalten, dass die Politiker Moralpredigten halten, während sie den Bürgern sagen, wir sollen unsere Heizung im Winter nicht mehr benutzen. Daraufhin habe ich alles niedergeschrieben und mit meinen Studenten die alten Wirtschaftslehren mit der neuen Kryptowelt verbunden. Dadurch konnte ich einen Haufen Kohle machen, wie du hier siehst, weiter reichen und das machen, was ich schon immer wollte. Und habe eine Strategie entwickelt, die völlig ohne Technikerfahrung umsetzbar ist. Und alles, was du dafür brauchst,
piece of fucking shit computer.
On to Prime Minister Mark Carney, who won a minority government on Tuesday night. And it's that minority government, says Stephen Brown of Capital Economics, that could lead to even greater increases in spending than the $130 billion already promised. Brown says that because Carney is going to need the support of the other political parties in order to stay in power, he's going to have to pay for it, noting that he's going to have to grant concessions to the parties in exchange for supporting the government, which means fiscal policy could end up even looser than the Liberals have signaled. Which, yeah, that wouldn't be surprising whatsoever, as we're all well aware the NDP was able to extract all sorts of concessions in exchange for supporting former Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. And if we do see this type of arrangement again, says David Rosenberg, then that's going to be less pressure for the Bank of Canada to cut rates than there would have been if the Conservatives had won. So the idea is that because the Liberals, especially now, have to bribe the other parties in order to stay in power, that they'll be spending a lot more than they had initially intended, that the Bank of Canada won't have to step in as hard to prop up the economy, a point that was reiterated by Tony Steele of Oxford Economics.
They're fighting a really difficult battle on two fronts, both the higher inflation from the tariffs and the downturn in the economy, and they were going to be very pragmatic and kind of hold rates where they are today in a kind of neutral territory. And this actually lends more credence to that because the federal government with the fiscal policy measures they're talking about is going to do more of the heavy lifting.
So yeah, because the government's going to be spending so much money into the economy, deficit spending at that, the central bank won't have to print as much to help support it.
okay.
And though, as we'll see in a few minutes, that should be how it works, history doesn't exactly give credence to that narrative. Let's take a look at the government's proposed deficits, projected to be 1.96% of GDP in 25 to 26. Though, as a brief aside, it is worth noting that some economists have called these numbers to be far too optimistic. Derek Holt of Scotiabank, who has had some of the more realistic predictions in the past, recently noted that these are all made-up numbers to be frank. Holt wrote in another note that these deficit projections could be understated as they rely on assumptions from March 5th, which, as we all know, was well before Liberation Day. So, Carney's spending plans were expected to lead to a 2% of GDP deficit going forward, and that was before they had to bribe the support of the other parties, and that was using old data. How much milk?
No. Dieses Buch ist für dich, wenn du die Wege erreichen möchtest, die sich gerade mit Künstlern Intelligenz dumm und dämlich verdienen. No, fine.
But let's stick with the 2% of GDP spending and see if that was enough to stave off rate cuts in the past 4 decades worth of available data. And if we look at history back all the way to 1980, we can see that any and all deficits with simultaneous or near simultaneous rate cuts from the Bank of Canada. In 2020, obviously, we got rate cuts. In 2016, even a tiny bit of rate cuts. In 2009, we had the global financial crisis, met along a bit of fiscal stimulus post 9/11, and then a lot of rate cuts pre-1995, despite massive amounts of fiscal spending. So, judging by every single instance over the past 40 years, just because the government engages in deficit spending doesn't mean the central bank holds pat. This doesn't make any sense. So, what I think we need to do is narrow the focus a little bit. Why exactly is the government spending? If the government is spending, if the government is borrowing money to provide fiscal support to a tanking economy due to the fallout from the Trump tariffs, and that fallout has been so bad that unemployment has skyrocketed, and the important part, inflation has gone down as a result. As we've seen before, the central bank could very well work in tandem with the fiscal authorities, providing support to help the fiscal path along. On the other hand, if the threat from the South subsides, which isn't out of the realm of possibility, and the government continues to spend like the threat is still there, which also isn't out of the realm of possibility, then that's a different story. And it's at that point that Canadians could and should expect Governor Macklem to discipline the fiscal authorities. Just stop. But Prime Minister Carney knows this very well. As he noted back in 2022 when he was criticizing Liz Truss, fiscal and should not be working at cross purposes. Or, to quote Carney directly, if one foot is on the brake and that's monetary policy, then the other should not be stomping on the gas. Now, is Prime Minister Carney going to remember what Governor Carney said and work with the Bank of Canada? Or is he going to work at cross purposes? I don't know. They're both central bank governors. They should both know not to suck in time, and Governor Macklem knows that Prime Minister Carney knows that.
And I know you know.
So, what does all this mean? It means that we're getting ahead of ourselves trying to predict interest rates at this uncertain early date. It means that, just as it did on Monday, Canada's economy rests on the fate of one man, and it's not the Prime Minister of Canada. If these tariffs continue to materialize,
I'm incredibly proud to introduce the new Pergolux Series 3. With the Series 3, we didn't just create a pergola, we created a smarter way to connect with nature, to bring the outdoors in. With the all-new Pergolux control system, seamlessly integrate smart devices to create the perfect environment. Effortless assembly stability, a smoother motor system. Elevate your outdoor living with the new Pergolux Series 3, nature and technology in perfect harmony.
Mittlerweile sogar Ärzte und Physiotherapeuten mit ihren Schmerzen zu uns, wenn die Schulmedizin nicht mehr weiterkommt. Weil wir einen Weg gefunden haben, der in den letzten Jahren über 1000 Menschen wieder ein schmerzfreies Leben ermöglicht hat. Die 85-jährige Ari muss sich nicht mehr am Rollator festhalten beim Laufen. Der 62-jährige Frank kann seine harten Schmerzmittel endlich in den Müll werfen und die 26-jährige Adriana kann endlich wieder Geige spielen, obwohl sie 7 Jahre lang ans Bett gefesselt war und sich dabei nicht mal mehr alleine die Zähne putzen konnte. Das haben wir nicht mit Operationen oder Yoga oder Einrenken oder irgendeiner der anderen 5 Millionen Schmerztherapien geschafft, sondern weil wir den Ursprungskörper wiederhergestellt haben. Denn ein funktionierender Körper, und sobald wir alle Fehlhaltungen in deinem Körper korrigieren, dann schaltet sich dein Nervensystem wieder auf Flugmodus, deine Schmerzen verstummen einfach und du kannst wieder ein Leben führen, wo nicht mehr Schmerzen die Grenzen setzen, nur noch deine Träume. Und wie wir das mit über 1000 Menschen geschafft haben und wie auch du wieder zurück in deine beschwerdefreien Ursprungskörper kommst, das zeigen wir dir zum kostenlosen und digitalen Schmerzfrei-Summit. Klick dafür jetzt einfach hier auf den Button und sichere dir jetzt dein kostenfreies Ticket. Hier betreuen wir dich über mehrere Wochen intensiver, als es jemals ein Arzt oder Therapeut könnte. Du erfährst das, was kein Arzt im Studium lernt, nämlich woher die wahren Ursachen deiner Schmerzen kommen. Wir zeigen dir zum Beispiel, wie du mit so einem Ball hier deine Schmerzen und Verspannung auflöst und dich für immer unabhängig vom Physio oder und zuletzt bekommst du die Bewegungsmuster, die Schritt für Schritt deine Schmerzen abstellen und ein bewegliches Leben wieder ermöglichen. Mittlerweile
Ah! Oh, never mind. They're down here. That was a stick your ass.
fuck them up. Okay. Oh no! Wait, what? Oh, I was like, wait, where is it? Okay, come here. Yeah, I know. Oh, fuck. Wipe your butt and wipe your feet. Come here. Come here. Yeah, happy puppy. You got clean butt. Come on. Fucking dope. Okay. Okay. No. Come here. Come here. Up. Up. Good job. Not a boy. That's a good boy. Okay, I think we're done. Oh, sorry. We got water everywhere. We got water everywhere. No. Stay there. God, you're such a baby. Ugh. I'm just a baby. Yeah. Oh. Oh. Not down.
Ah!
Fucking plates.
What?
These fucking stupid plates.
I'm not a stupid thing.
No, you're not a stupid plate, baby.
What?
No, you're not a stupid plate. You're a very smart plate.
I'm a smart thing.
Oh.
Not there because the dog is away. Huh?
Usually he calls me. So I go to bed on bed once I go to bed. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm just telling you.
What's up, baby? I miss you. I am so sad. What? I miss you. I am the oldest dog in the world. Oh, God. Stop it. Get out of there. No, that's my no-no place. Not for you. For daddy only. Oh, creep. Ow! No, wait. Okay. Here, drink that. Good boy. Ow. Everything's like a park.
Not a relationship.
That is very true, baby. Thank you.
I'm incredibly proud to introduce the new Pergolux series.
Move, please. Move, please. Thank you. Oh.
Oh, wow, wow. Oh. Oh, oh. Oh. Oh, oh. Oh. Oh, oh.
Here.
Oh, oh. Yeah. Yeah.
What?
Super cool.
Please say you roll joints.
What?
Did you roll joints?
Why?
Any?
You know, I'm the perfect boyfriend.
Right. Thinking of putting a piece of tape over
Tape,
that.
that would be nice.
Yeah. Okay, I go pee and get these tape. I'm lighting this right now because I can't wait.
Big chips.
What's underneath a left bird?
Like ruffle chips.
Yeah, they're like the Cape Cod chip, kettle chips.
What?
Cape Cod kettle chips. Never seen those guys? The grocery store? No.
No. No, but I've seen some weird chip made out of chip.
Okay.
When I mean made out of nut potato. Ah! Okay.
Good boy. Huh? Well, all of you. Oh, my boys. All my loves. Why?
I can't let them move me to Brixton. Oh, if I get to Brixton, it'll kill me.
What?
I'm gonna get
Today, Cody showed me just a little part